Hi everybody, Brian Easton, author of the autobiography of a werewolf hunter series, and welcome to what we're going to call Season 2 of Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. Hope everybody had a great holiday season and are now enjoying their winter, whatever that might look like where you are. I'm feeling a little more Irish than usual tonight, which is why I picked out the Jameson, which is always good for that kind of job, so cheers. Not a huge fan of Irish whiskey, but Jameson gets the job done when you're in the mood for it. So we got a couple of updates for you that I wanted to share. If you're tracking these things, Winterfox, the Winterfox Journals Book 1 is now available from Audible as an audio book. We had some trouble with that before Christmas, getting the preface audio and getting that all sorted out, but we seem to be okay now, and you can get that. You can get that on at Audible or through Amazon rather. And at the end of the program, I'm going to tell you how to get a free code a code to download a free copy of that audio book. So stick with me through the program, and I'll let you know how we can do that. The other update that we're making tonight is just to let you know that the Winterfox Journals Book 2 is well in progress now. It's starting to pick up steam. It's kind of an incremental process, given all the research that I have to do. But that just means it's just getting ahead of steam, and pretty soon the dam's gonna burst, and we'll be off to the races with that. Now, if you don't know, at the end of the first Michael Winterfox book, the Winterfox Journals, we left a 17-year-old Michael on the brink of his involvement in World War I. And so the second book picks up from there and leads him to the trenches. And lately there's been a resurgence of interest in the First World War, or the Great War, as it's also known, largely due to the fact that over the last few years we've kind of hit the century mark on that war. And films like 1917 have certainly played a role in its bringing it back around and bringing that conflict back into the forefront of a public view, I guess. But I've always been interested in World War I, just because I think it's so often neglected, or has been until fairly recently. It's kind of a neglected chapter of world history, I thought. And in the shadow of its, larger sibling, or larger sequel, which was to come, World War II. But what also interests me about the Great War is that it's kind of the crucible of modern warfare. You know what I mean? It was like a modern war, first modern war, but still being fought with these antiquated standards. I'll show you what I mean. So practically for the first time in any kind of combat situation, we've got airplanes that can attack from the sky. We've got real armor moving across the ground, and we've got machine guns and poisonous gas. Radio is still in its infancy. Telephone lines are fairly reliable as far as taking for a defensive position, but during the attack they're not so easily maintained, and they're easy to cut. So we're still sending messengers across the trenches and across no man's land with orders for troop movement and to request incoming fire assistance and things like that. We're using carrier pigeons to communicate these things across battle lines. And the field is still dependent upon horses, lots and lots of horses, to draw their more primitive weapons of war, cannons and the like, across the battlefield and across the mud and the trenches. So there's this sense that World War I is like this painful, bloody birth of the 20th century, for all intents and purposes. And somewhere in that smoke and the pain and the death of that war is the last age of magic, the end of the last age of magic. and it may be the last stage that the world ever sees again. At least that's where our storyline is coming from in the Winterfox Journals. Around this time last year, when we first started getting started here at the Werewolf Bar, we talked a lot about influences, about the influences on my writing and character development and the plot line in general, other aspects of the novels, and yet somehow, and I don't know how this happened, I managed to omit one of the most important influences on the character of Sylvester James. Now, as anyone with an eye for popular culture can tell, there are aspects of SLJ owing to modern comic book mythology, as well as the Western genre, pulp fiction, a little noir, and there's some personal history there as well. As you may remember, I spoke about my father, who is a minister of 50 years plus, and how his idea, or his hatred for the idea of werewolves, really influenced me as a kid when I was first getting to know the horror genre, and how his hatred for the idea of werewolves very much colored the glasses that SLJ sees through in the books. But what I neglected to share with you at that time, and it boggles my mind to know how I overlooked this, was the historic figure who also inspired SLJ's hatred of the beast. Now, if you're not from the Ohio Valley, and if you haven't read Zane Grey's classic Frontier trilogy, then you might not know the name Lewis Wetzel. And it may not mean anything to you, and if it doesn't, let me introduce you. Lewis Wetzel was a historic frontiersman, a borderman, and a scout in the 1700s. Now, if you need a frame of reference for that, think of him as a very dark and violent Daniel Boone, because that's pretty much what he was. His story, which is that of a cold-blooded killer, was romanticized by Zane Grey in his Frontier trilogy, or the Betty Zane trilogy, in the 1900s. And by today's standards, Wetzel would have been considered a complete sociopath, a hate crime serial killer. But to the people of the 1780s, living on a lawless frontier, dealing with white renegade raiders as well as a hostile native population, Wetzel was a dark hero, if only for the fact that he was on their side. That's because Lewis Wetzel was an Indian fighter, and not just an Indian fighter. He hated his enemy so much that he never missed the opportunity to kill one. Whether they were unarmed, whether they came as peace emissaries, or whether they were sleeping even, Lewis Wetzel, he didn't care. And he killed them every chance he got. Now, it's this kind of single-minded, not-so-sane hatred that really helped mold and form my idea for Sylvester's hatred for the beast. Lewis never cut his hair. He let it grow until some say that it hung down to his knees when it was all let down and combed out. And this was the point of tempting the scalping knife of his enemies, in fact, give his enemies a trophy worth the effort it would take to get it from him. Lewis Wetzel's intractable hatred for his enemies helped me define Sylvester's remorseless blood feud with the beast. The irony between history and fiction, of course, being that Sylvester himself is part native and immersed in native tradition. And Wetzel was, by all accounts, one of the fiercest hand-to-hand fighters European America ever turned out, and one of the most legendary woodsmen and guerrilla warriors of all time, which also translates over to Sylvester. Anyway, the web is full of information and material about Wetzel if you're interested in knowing more about him. And if you can, I can recommend Wetzel by Richard Fleming. I'll put that up on your screen for you. It's well-written historical fiction that is true to the life of Wetzel and also is enjoyable to read. But most people today, well, many people today, who know about Wetzel would like to forget about him as a cultural embarrassment and dismiss him as a villain. Others, like myself, remember him as a product of his time and circumstances, largely, muddled with more than a dash of mental instability on the man's part. But a man, nonetheless, who made war on his enemies using their own style of fighting. And don't misunderstand me, and this is important, because it's at the heart of my series, and it's the heart of what we're dealing with today as a society. Hatred is an ugly thing. Perhaps it is the ugliest of things. And that's true whether your enemy has warranted that hatred or not, because of what hatred does to the person who carries that weight around inside of them. So it's true in real life, whether your enemy is another race, another religion, or another lifestyle. And it's true in the fiction I write. Nobody ever claimed Sylvester Logan James was a good guy. He's not. And it's hatred that made him what he is. Let's have another shot of the Irish before we go. To you. So I'm going to give away, as I said earlier, I'm going to give away a free redemption code for the Winterfox Journals Book 1, the audio book, next time we meet. All you have to do is to be entered to win is to enter in the comments down below a song that makes you think of Sylvester James whenever you hear it. And if you don't know the character well enough to make that kind of a guess, just wing it. And be sure to subscribe to the page, because we're going to have more from the channel as 2020 keeps on rolling, and we got more coming your way. So thanks for watching. Whiskey with the Werewolf Hunter. The Werewolf Bar is open again. Happy hunting and mind the moon.